The opinions of the commentator or commentators are solely those of the commentators and not of CJAD 800 or Bell Media.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
9:06, welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Hello, Josh.
Hello.
And this week on the program, we're talking wine with Caroline and Alexandra from Onivino Wine and Spirits. They are on the way on today's Entrepreneur. But first, a quick chat, as we usually do, about some of the local business news. And shall we begin with, we talk a lot about retail on the program and how depressing it's getting in Montreal. Of course, we had a lot of major closures lately, but there are some bright spots in Montreal. And one of the bright spots is a shoe company, actually, called Off the Hook. Now, well, tell me a bit about them, because what I think is interesting is they've been given a very prestigious title from Adidas, like a signature retailer, which allows them, special privileges, special products. So here's one example of the way that maybe one retailer can work if they get to that level of prestige, maybe.
Well, I think it's a story about finding your niche. It's a story about creating, I guess, a reason for the consumer to walk into your store. They've created, or this brand, this retail brand that says, you know what, you want to buy high end, in style running shoes or type of shoes, then by all means come into our store. And they've been around, I believe, 15 years. And I think the great part of the story, there's a couple of great parts, but one of them is they had a vision, and they didn't believe they were too small to go after a great strategic alliance or find a partner as huge as Adidas. So I think they had the, call it cojones, to go after what they wanted to. They needed to fill some big shoes, I guess, and went after it. I think the other part of the story that's hugely, inspiring is they talk towards the end of it about paying it forward. They realize they're the small guy. They realize that they've had some great success in partnering with a large company like Adidas. And because they've dealt with so many smaller companies over the years, they're kind of trying to pay it forward too, and giving them some advice and kind of help them and help their suppliers and some of their consumers along the way. So I think it's a great story about a small company that not only was able to dream big, but was able to make it big, in certainly as far as partnering with a large company.
So maybe the lesson for retailers downtown is if retail is gonna survive, it has to bring another dimension that you can't find from just anything that's going on online.
You got to be, I think we say this constantly. Not only do you have to find your differentiation, you have to find your unique value proposition, but you got to find the reason for the consumer to want to walk into your store. If there's no reason for them to want to walk in, if they can't answer the why of why I should go into that store, then it almost doesn't matter what you're going to sell.
From one retail success story to a startup success story in the tech industry, Hootsuite, which is, of course, Canadian, and there's still a lot of great buzz about Hootsuite. They're Vancouver-based. An example of, I think, this is a social media management system. So it's one of these companies that would never have existed 10 years ago, right?
Correct.
And here you have what's going to become probably a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars one day, based on something that didn't even exist just over a decade ago.
And what the article, or what their story is partially about, is getting users to subscribe, but giving away their product and gaining that consumer base, gaining that, call it, list of customers, list of email addresses, list of people that they can reach out to, because that's where their value of their brand is going to lie. Yes, they've created a good software and a good platform, no question about it, with all the social media, but they've also achieved the goal of hitting, I think it was 11 million users plus. And that is huge for anybody that's looking out for any marketing efforts or what have you, notwithstanding the castle, the anti-spam regulations. It's an absolute success story from that vantage point. Yes, they have a lot of employees. They have to constantly create product, because when you have 11 million consumers, if you don't have the right product, then they ain't going to stay. So they do have to constantly, but to build that base and to build it off a free platform, I think that's excellent. That's huge. It's a great model. Now, of course, you need the investors behind you, because if you're not collecting on the, I think what they term the freemium pricing, then you have to find it elsewhere.
So, but here's my question, Josh, because a lot of apps, for example, make money this way. You download the app for free, but they're collecting marketing data on you. That's how they make money. So that's why Instagram is valued at, I think it was $5 billion or whatever Facebook paid for it, because of these mounds of marketing data on its users. But eventually, when all these companies have all the same data, these tech companies, is that maybe where the bubble will burst eventually, when we have all this data that is now going to be so plentiful and not as valuable?
It might. I mean, you're talking about, what they term big data. So big data is finding trends. It's for the large marketplaces, for the large retailers, for the large B2B, B2C, to find out what the trends are in the marketplace. And when you can track, because you can't readily give out certain information, but you can track trends. You can track, if people are tracking, 25 to 34-year-olds and what they're buying or what they're doing. That's hugely important for those that are trying to target certain markets. So that data and the trends that it can supply are absolutely huge for those that want to target their markets that much better.
Speaking of the forthcoming tech bubble, this is an interesting story by Ken Tenser in the Globe and Mail. It's the headline says it all. Is crowdfunding the new tech bubble, or just an old-fashioned junk bond? We've talked about this before, Josh. My concern that not everything that is necessarily popular in the crowdfunding space is worth doing. I refer to the pizza place in Indiana who refused service to gay people. They raised over probably close to $1 million by now. So not everything crowdfunded is worth doing, right?
Well, I think what people have to understand is if they want to get into crowdfunding, they want to, and I'm talking from the investor standpoint, forget the people that are looking for the funds. The people that are actually putting down money to get a free t-shirt or a free product, or just to be in on the beginning so they can tell a story. I guess at what point does it catch up with you? It's one thing to give $25. It's another thing for, with this equity crowdfunding that's coming in, another thing to start giving thousands of dollars. At some point, reality's got to catch up. At some point, people are going to want to have some return on their investment. And the crowdfunding, I'm just not so sure that it's going to have that return. The reality is, any new business that starts up today, not everyone's successful. You'll have your 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 100, whatever the proportion is. Not everything's going to be a home run. So those that are looking to get some funding from more of an investing nature of crowdfunding, those big dollars, I'm not so sure how long they'll last. And that's, I think, that the tech bubble, analogy that he's referring to is, at some point people will say, I need to invest that money to have a return, and not just to do something nice, or not just to get on the ground floor of something, or not just to tell a cool story. And I think that's where maybe the bubble might burst one day. I think we're not so close to it because it's still pretty new, but at some point reality is going to slap somebody in the face.
Do you like the comparison, though? Is it a good old-fashioned junk bond? Is it a penny stock? Is it something that investors just take a gamble on?
I think it's absolutely investors take a gamble on. I think it's basically go to the lottery store and at least, here, I guess you can see what the product could be. You're seeing what the potential is. You're trying to giving your own input on what the future is like. But the reality is, who knows? And from a consumer standpoint, it's absolutely rolling the dice.
Another interesting piece in the Globe and Mail real quick. 10 tips for new businesses in new industries. And I'll give you the top 3 and maybe we'll get your thoughts on that. Customers come first, think big, and have a vision that reaches beyond profit.
I think customers come first is the first and foremost of everything. And that is, if it's in the best, I repeat this maybe far too often, bit of a broken record. If it is in the best interest of your customer, it is naturally, essentially, and going to be in the best interest for yourself and your business. If your customer is happy, they're going to keep coming back. They're going to want to buy more. They're going to want to buy different. And that's what will help contribute to your bottom line. If your customer is happy, if it is in the best interest of your client, your customer, it will undoubtedly be in your own best interest.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800. Coming up, Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak. They talk wine from Onivino. But first, it is 7:15.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you on today's Entrepreneur. And this evening we chat with Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits. Caroline and Alexandra, welcome to CJD.
Hello. Thank you.
So first question is the easiest. What is Onivino Wine and Spirits? It's obviously something to do with wine, and you brought some delicious wine in studio. We appreciate that. So tell us about your business.
So Onivino Wine and Spirits is a boutique agency specializing in importing really unique products, very innovative products, something that you don't typically find in stores. And we like to bring that to our clients, restaurants, private buyers, hotels, bars, and what have you. So that's pretty much the focus, is wine and spirits.
What makes it a unique product? Like, what to you, when you're searching out a wine or a product or spirit, what to you makes it unique? And I turn to Alex, she's the one eyeing. She's certainly got that taste bud in
She's
there.
got the twinkle in her eye.
Exactly.
I know about that. I would say that we're looking for products that aren't made on a giant scale, something that would show, different expression every year, something where the winemaker can be creative and express something different instead of what the consumer might imagine that they want to drink.
Now, how did you ladies get into this? Like, what were you doing before Onivino?
So I actually was working for a small vineyard in Italy, and I was the director of sales and marketing for North America. So I had the opportunity of traveling around and seeing how importing and distributing alcohol worked. And I was just fascinated and absolutely loved that side of the wine business. And Alexandra...
I was lucky enough to get a job with a wine and spirits agency called LCC right after graduating from hotel management school in St. Adele. And so that's where Caroline and I happened to have met.
Yeah, so Alexandra was working for the company that was importing the wines that I was representing, and we pretty much ran to each other like in a field of daisies. We just fell in love. It was instant. We said one day we're going to make this dream come true. And we did. We started about 4 years ago. And we've been going strong, plowing through the market. Now,
what was the hard? I mean, starting this business, you guys both had, a certain amount of experience. You were in this industry, but yet you're starting something fresh on your own. What were the first steps that you had to take? Were you fortunate because you came from a certain domain? Like, what was the good, the bad, and the ugly, just of those first few months, I'll say?
I think the biggest advantage that we had was that we had formed really strong relationships in our previous jobs. So we were able just to knock on those doors and say, hey guys, we're here. It's us again. Whereas if we had just started out day one, most people were oversaturated and kind of saying, we're not really accepting any new agencies, and we already are very loyal to the ones we work with, which we can understand. But having that kind of laid the groundwork beforehand really worked well for us, and we're just so well liked, Well,
if you bring a bottle of wine wherever you go, then you got to be liked to some degree.
Fair enough.
In studio with us, Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits. It's 7:23 on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
This evening on today's Entrepreneur, Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits. I want to ask you first, Caroline and Alexandra, did you really, did this business come out of a passion of yours? Was this the ultimate goal, is to make your passion your business?
Absolutely. We're both very lucky to be driven by doing what we love every day, because there's many obstacles, and it's nice to have a reminder that you're just working with products and people that you love and care about.
And you mentioned obstacles, and I'm sure there are a number of them over the years and that you've encountered. But certainly getting into this in such a regulated industry, where we know the SAQ basically rules all. Mm-hmm. How does it work, or how did you find it with the licenses and permits, and was that difficult to obtain? Maybe you can quickly recount us some experience behind that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of obstacles anytime you're dealing with alcohol or any regulated product, as you mentioned, but there's also a lot of advantages to dealing with the SAQ, and I think that the experience that I had having worked in a lot of different markets across North America, I was able to see the real advantages to it, where, I know that my suppliers are going to be paid on time, and it is quite organized, although very, red tape and whatnot, but it is really well structured. So I think that we do appreciate, as much as we are sometimes banging our heads against the wall to figure out how things are done, but it's just a lot of trial and error, and we've made a few mistakes and learned along the way. So we grow every day.
Now, you guys complement each other pretty well. Like, do you overlap in your roles? Like, what do each of you kind of specialize in your own respective business?
Well, it actually does work out perfectly. And I often say this. I think that in our business, a lot of times it's driven by strictly wine passion or the love of wine. We both do love wine, but Alexandra is a real specialist in wine. She's an advanced sommelier. She's working towards her master's. So she has the real love of the wine. And then I'm more really passionate about the business of wine. So I'm more of the numbers girl, and that's how we complement each other really well. So when I'm explaining to people what we do on a daily basis, because people often ask, they can't really understand, I say that Alexandra will be tasting a wine and really picking it apart and saying where she could see us selling it and why. And I'm just, with my pen and pencil saying, or my pen and paper just saying, Ali, it's too expensive. We can't do it. And she's like, please, come on. So we pretty much go back and forth like that.
So Alex, how do you manage that? Combining the business side with, hey, this is the most amazing wine, we absolutely have to bring it in. And when Caroline looks at you and says, are you crazy? It's far too expensive. It'll never sell. We have to keep too much on the shelf. How do you deal with a situation like that?
Well, I think having experienced ordering wines that you can't sell, the trauma of being stuck with buying your own product has really molded me into making more, safer choices. But it is hard because sometimes I really do love something that, not everybody... I mean, wine's a funny thing. People want to try and taste new things, but they also only want to spend $12.50. So it's kind of,
Bienvenue au Quebec. Yeah, I get the picture.
Yeah.
Now, part of this, certainly from it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's wine. Everybody's loving it. But behind the scenes, I mean, if you're how many SKUs, how many wines do you deal with?
We have over 100 products. We deal with 30 wineries.
So 30 wineries, 100 products, automatically that screams, how do I manage all the inventory? How do I manage the timing and bringing it in and making sure it gets out and make sure everything gets stamped and my customer, I mean, that inventory management aspect that I don't know if you dealt with in your prior life before Onivino, but how do you deal with that? How do you manage that? And what have you learned?
It makes me feel alive.
Because you have no
to
choice.
Delegate to Caroline.
Yeah, it's really quite challenging. And it's funny, I was speaking to a friend of mine who runs his own company, and he asked me, so is it like just in time inventory? And I said, no, it's actually the opposite. It's never here when we need it, and then we always have too much when we don't. So it's a really challenging thing, especially because we buy a few months in advance. So we'll be buying for, Christmas very soon because it takes several months to get here. And then, of course, the cash flow is always very challenging. And it is like doing, I haven't done an MBA, and I've often toyed with the idea of doing it. And I say I'm doing an MBA every single day running this company. So it's a lot of Excel spreadsheets and just playing around with numbers, which I quite enjoy, to be honest.
Which means, so you're not using a software, you kind of build your own monster.
Yeah, we actually a friend and I built a really advanced Excel spreadsheet that pretty much calculates everything for me. So it's really quite advanced, and we're very, very happy with that.
Now, there's no doubt that when you have all this inventory and you got to manage it in the cash flow, there's got to be customers, there's got to be marketing that comes next. So when we come back from the break, we'll hear a lot about that part of your business at Onivino.
Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits this evening on Today's Entrepreneur at 7:30.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:35 on Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guests this evening, Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits. Let's move on to marketing, guys, and let's talk about how you put yourselves on the map. It's been only 4 years, you said? So 4 years, and you guys have certainly made your mark. How did you do it in so little time?
We drove a lot of wine to a lot of different establishments and did a lot of tastings and had a lot of parties and just keep going.
Just make sure that the right bottle is in front of the right people.
Exactly.
And that's what you push. Now, when you're getting, I mean, I presume you have a lot of restaurant clients.
Yes.
but there are a lot of one-offs. There's very few chains, I guess, you deal with. So you do have to kind of see and meet a lot of people.
Exactly.
How do you're two of you, how do you get to everybody?
Well, thank God it's a very competitive industry and people don't want to see that much of you. So that really takes out a bit of the stress. And I think if you just manage your time properly and you know who you're going to see with what wine, and it's something that's manageable once you get the swing of it. You come on shows like CJAD and talk about your wine.
That can't hurt. No question about it.
We're going to take the week off.
As long as they can all find you, right? Onivino.ca or wherever they can find you.
Exactly.
Well done.
So they prompted, you give me a little wine and I'm able to
Plug anything.
to plug almost anything.
Like putty in our hands.
Exactly. To me, the bottle is not quite done yet, but it's getting close. So tell me, what about from an online aspect? Are you embracing the social media and the online? Does that work for you, or is it really that be in your face and make sure the product is in their face, or some combination thereof?
Definitely a combination of the two. We have some wines that will post a photo on Facebook or Instagram and people start calling us, I want that. It looks delicious. We're like, all right, more power to you.
Looks delicious? How does the wine look delicious?
So funny, just from the label. Sometimes people are so attracted to it. We're like, that's such an odd comment, but okay. But a lot of the times we do have to get in front of people and they do need to get a sip of that wine to really know.
Now, are you constantly searching for new customers? And if so, how do you reach out to them? How do you find them?
We try to reach out to new clients, but this is one of those businesses where you want to work with people that you've developed a relationship with, just because the restaurant industry can be a bit touchy, and it's probably safer for your pocketbook to be dealing with people that are still going to be around in the next little while, because it's an investment on everyone's part, right? There's time, there's tastings, there's visiting the client, there's bringing people there. So we're all trying to support each other.
Montreal must be really interesting in that respect, and dangerous, because there's so many. I mean, most restaurants are independent. There's new restaurants opening up all the time and closing all the time. How do you guys make sure that the people you're selling to aren't going to be out of business in a week from now?
Praying, a lot of praying. No, I mean, I think you get a sense of who's doing well and why they're doing well. And I think it's just a bit of logic, and there's no surprises really when you hear something's closing. Unfortunately, there's always a few signs, so.
And I think, Dan, after the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about closing of restaurants and kind of the anatomy of a restaurant in bankruptcy. But in the meantime, as we come to the marketing in your customer base, does that mean, have you said no to a customer before? I mean, you're kind of just starting out, and you want to get all your customers, but have you had the ability to say no?
It's a funny thing. When you first start your business, you're really hungry for it. So you'll say yes to just about anybody. And then as time goes on and you've been burnt a few times, you start to become more selective. So yes, I have to say in the past, probably year and a half, we've really tightened our our belt and sort of had to say no to a few customers.
And do you monitor your competition? I mean, there's so many people out there selling. People might not know it, but I'm sure there's a ton of private wine importers and spirit importers. How closely do you keep tabs on them? Or, I mean, there's so much product out there. How do you manage that?
Well, it's a small, big industry. So, I mean, you end up doing events that are, industry related. So you're always getting a sense of who's doing what. And there's all sorts of trade magazines that are relevant to our market. So I think it's kind of hard to not know what's going on and keep up with the trends.
Do you go to trade shows?
Absolutely.
Do they work for you?
Yes, to a certain extent.
Hesitation. And we've had a number of entrepreneurs on the show, and they kind of run hot and cold. Some of them say trade shows are absolutely awesome. It's a great showcase for them. And others say, well, I got to attend, I got to walk around, I want to see what's out there, but it doesn't really do very much. So in your industry, does it work for you?
We are very selective as to which shows we participate in, and the ones that we've chosen to work with, it's been maybe 3 years running that we do the same ones, and we're very happy with them. But we've definitely declined to participate at others that just don't fit what we do. So.
No, it's bang for the buck, right? It's not cheap. Right. It takes time, dollars, and effort to go. You got to make sure there's some type of return.
Absolutely.
We're also building a brand, so it's kind of hard to establish what the instant effect is of our participation is as well. Sometimes you just got to make people curious and thirsty, and then maybe on the next order they'll be interested. So it's not as cut and dry as we would like it to be.
Now there's no doubt there's got to be associations, whether it's wine importer or wine or spirits associations. Do you belong to an association in your industry?
We do.
You can point to each other, but nobody can see.
I just pointed at Caroline.
We are part of an association of private importers. So although we do have a few products that are listed in the SAQ, so wines that you will find on the shelves, we focus mostly on private imports. So we have joined what's called RASPIPAV, which is an association of all the private importers in Quebec. And believe it or not, there's over 400 agents in Quebec doing this. So we're all kind of behind the scenes. Nobody realizes all the work that goes on behind it. But it is a great group, and we do host 2 events, one in the spring and one in the fall. And it's an opportunity for the buyers to come and taste, and private buyers as well can come and buy single unit bottles as opposed to full cases, which is the only time of the year where they can do that. And it's a really, really great time.
Do you find that your association is more collaborative than competitive? Again, we've heard some conflicting stories of other entrepreneurs that say, I don't want to join because, they steal ideas or it does, it's too cutthroat. And others that say, you know what, everybody respects each other. We collaborate, we share some fantastic ideas, and it works. So how do you find that association?
I really like it, and I think that it's been very beneficial to us so far. We tend to have more allies than foes, but I mean, there's always a mix of everything in every industry, so you just got to be wary who you trust.
Now, you said you deal with about 30 different wineries. How do they assist you in marketing their product?
So we'll have the representative of the winery, whether it be the winemaker, the owner of the vineyard, depending on the size, or the export director, will come into the market once or twice a year, sometimes at this wine show that we spoke of in the fall with RASPIPAV. Otherwise, it'll be just a random visit during the year, and we'll organize some tasting events, some tastings with restaurants, winemaker dinners, which are really a lot of fun, where we can pair the food with their wines. And it's a really great time to showcase the products of this one winery. And that works really well for us.
Now, you're 2 of you. Do you have any other people working with you? What kind of has worked for you in the past? Do they represent you well? What's been your experience?
We've tried to hire some people in the past, and unfortunately, we're not big enough that we can afford, I think, to pay somebody to do what we do and train them to do what we do and motivate them to do what we do. So it just kind of became a situation where we had to go back to basics and keep the formula simple, and it's working quite well for us, actually more beneficial than the latter. So for now, it's just the 2 of us. It probably will be that way for a few more years, but hopefully we'll be able to try that again soon.
Do you think that not having an extra body might limit your growth?
As it stands, it was limiting our growth to have an extra body, so no.
Oh, what, the extra person was limiting it?
Yeah, it was just it was like having an extra child that you had to hold hands all the time, and it's normal that they weren't as driven as we expected or wanted them to be, because it's just not their business, So.
It takes a lot of drive and a lot of passion, and we just both happen to have it, which is so lucky in itself just to have the 2 of us, that to find a third or fourth, it will come down the line. I think organic growth is really important, and we did try to grow really quickly, and we had to scale it back, like Ali mentioned. But I think that it's definitely going to be a diamond in the rough that we'll have to search for.
Well, you're 4 years in, and it sounds like you're definitely on the right path. So much success to you. And I think it's so much to learn and so much to digest. So no pun intended, in such a short period, that there's so much more to come.
So Caroline and Alexandra, obviously in a business that they have to watch restaurant closings very closely. And after the break, we'll talk to Patrick Sullivan, trustee at Fuller Landau, and he'll do a segment called "Anatomy of a Restaurant Closing," restaurant bankruptcy. So that's coming up because we've had a few of them in Montreal, of course. It's 7:45 right now.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you. And we're talking wine this evening with Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits. And because they deal so much with restaurants and occasionally with restaurants going bust, we bring in Patrick Sullivan, trustee at Fuller Landau, to talk about the anatomy, Patrick, of a restaurant bankruptcy. And I'm guessing that this happens in Montreal probably a bit more often than most other cities in North America.
Good evening, guys. Yes, actually, if you look at statistics, running 12 months out of the total bankruptcies in Quebec, approximately 15% arise from an operation related to food accommodation. So that means there's a lot of openings, but a lot of closures, at least probably an equivalence.
No question. Now, usually, what's the biggest pitfall that a restaurant owner will find or be slapped in the face with, or kind of not realize when kind of the not so good things hit the fan?
Well, opening a restaurant is very emotional. A lot of people want to become their own operator, owner. And sometimes it's like a second career. Sometimes it's like my kid went to study in the food industry or became a chef, and I'm going to help him. I'm going to open up a restaurant. A lot of money is invested, obviously, into the leaseholds. Banks are very shy on the financing of restaurants,
To say the least.
to say the least. When things go bad, unfortunately, directors' liabilities come into play. Even more so in that type of industry, because there are basically no assets other than something that's stuck on the wall or the investment that we put on those walls. So the nature of the business makes that your suppliers will supply you provided you pay them either COD or within 7 days or 14 days, or if you're a long time person in the industry, you may get 21 days to pay. So suppliers don't support the business that much in terms of credit. So where do you get your credit when things start to go slowly? You're either going to stop paying your rent, you're going to stop paying your deductions at source. Definitely GST, QST is going to be the last ones on the hit list. So when things go bad, obviously directors' liabilities start to kick in. So thinking that you're protected because you've incorporated might not mean much.
No, because as you say, the financing isn't so quick to find, so you have to find out your other ways. Unfortunately, people lean on these government deductions or these government remittances a little bit too much. And of course, then they have the right to come after the individual, the directors. Do they have the right to come after the shareholders?
Shareholders, well, they don't come after shareholders. They come after directors. Otherwise, a public company that would go bankrupt, a lot of people would be in trouble in certain cases. And you know what? We're talking with very small entrepreneurs, very small businesses, so they can't necessarily afford to have liability insurance or directors' liability insurance in order to avoid those types of problems. So, I mean, friends, love money, all of that gets blown away. And after a while, well, then you fund yourself with the government when things go bad. It's a question of having the right product, the right place, like you always say, and having the people come in and enjoy themselves.
Now the employees when place goes bankrupt, yes, you have the government, but the employees are, can they knock on the door and say, hey, Mr. Owner, Mr. Director, you didn't pay me my vacation, you didn't do me you didn't give me the right amount at the end when you let me go. What can they come back after?
Employees are protected to a certain degree, but we have to understand that they're protected based on assets. Each employee is always entitled to what we call the Wage Earner Protection Program, the WEP, whereby there's a security up to the tune of $2,000 for unpaid wages and vacations going back 6 months prior to the event, which in this particular case would be a bankruptcy. But all of this is related to assets. So the government will pay the $2,000 to the employees, but then they will turn around and say, well, I have to recover my money from those assets. I have a super priority. But if there are no assets to be realized on, they will go after the director or directors and sue them for the monies that they will have paid the employees. So indirectly, you have the Commission des Normes du Travail, and you can have also the federal government that will sue you under the WEP program because they didn't recover their monies.
Now, you spoke a lot about assets, so when we come back after the break, we'll chat a little bit about the value or the lack thereof of those assets in a bankruptcy.
Trustee Patrick Sullivan on restaurant bankruptcy, and Caroline Bramstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits in studio this evening on Today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800 with us this evening, Patrick Sullivan, trustee from Fuller Landau, talking about restaurant bankruptcy, and of course Caroline and Alexandra still in studio from Onivino. We'll have their one piece of advice for today's Entrepreneur in a moment.
Now, Caroline, Alex, have you guys kind of had to live through a bankruptcy or two or three?
We have had to live through a few different experiences in the past couple of years, yes.
Did you learn anything specific? Did you change any of your processes, or you just kind of, your eyes just got a little bit more wide open?
definitely opened up the eyes for us. I think, like I was saying earlier, we were open to everything in the beginning, and then we started to be a little bit more selective as to who we did business with.
Yeah, I'm sure you have to. Now, Patrick, before you kept focusing on the assets of a restaurant and all that. Now, in a bankruptcy, are they worth anything really?
Unfortunately, if I were an auctioneer, I would tell you the market is inundated with restaurant assets, from old to brand new. Actually, there have been so many foreclosures that you're, other than the immovables, which are basically gyprock and fancy lights and these beautiful glasses and everything. What's left? There's the kitchen assets, and there's tables and chairs. So, all in all, you're lucky if you realize 10% of the original cost on a liquidation basis, and that's really being lucky.
That's really at best. Does that mean that new restaurant operators, ones that are about to open, can actually get a deal on some great assets or go into a location that might have failed before?
Oh, absolutely. But you see, the problem is, as I was saying, it's an emotional thing. It's a concept. It's my own personal concept, so it has to be with my own designs. So other than buying the kitchen furniture, which basically is going to be used to do the processing, people have a tendency to want to personalize the looks of the restaurant. So they're not necessarily going to go with secondhand chairs or secondhand tables, or, they'll want to bring in their own concept. But there is a lot of stuff out there on the market. I mean, sometimes, the owner of the leased premises will literally buy back the assets, and he's going to try to find a turnkey operator and say, here, this is it, and now you operate, and this is the amount of rent you're going to be paying.
So much to know, but so little time. As we come to the last moments of the show, we'll turn to Alexandra and Caroline and ask each of you, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
So I'm a big fan of fake it till you make it. Sometimes it's you wake up and there's a long day ahead of you and you don't know how you're going to get through, but you put on your smile and you go.
Excellent. Caroline?
I would say to do something that you love, and it really won't feel like you're doing work at all. Like, I wake up every single morning, I'm excited. I work really late at night, and I genuinely love what I'm doing. And I think that's the real secret to success.
No question. And Dan, we've heard that. I won't say far too often, because you can never hear it far too often, but the passion behind it, and certainly knowing what you do. And I think the takeaway that I have here is they've paired up. They found a partnership that works. They found a partnership that complement each other, and they don't step on each other's toes. They collaborate, and they make themselves better than the two that they are together. Notwithstanding the occasional looks they give each other. So kudos to you, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Caroline Brownstein and Alexandra Boak of Onivino Wine and Spirits, and thanks to Patrick Sullivan, trustee at Furlough Landau, for the talk about restaurant bankruptcy. Josh, back next Monday night at 7 p.m. here on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.